Hey everyone! With all the attention the OnePlus 9 Pro has been getting, it can be pretty easy to forget its more affordable sibling. It too should benefit from the collaboration with Hasselblad, and it also has a powerful Snapdragon 888 chipset. So, should you get this phone? I'm Angie for GSM Arena, and this is our review of the OnePlus 9. In a lot of ways, when you take your first look at the OnePlus 9, it can feel a little bit like déjà vu. The phone shares a lot of design similarities with the OnePlus 8T, the one glaring exception being the design of a new camera setup on the back. Our unit is in the winter mist coloring, which has a glossy finish, though there are two other color options with matte ones. It's slightly smaller than the Pro, and it's around 10 grams lighter in markets like India and China than in North America and Europe, possibly due to wireless charging support. The phone has Gorilla Glass 5 on both sides and a reinforced plastic frame that's high quality enough that it could easily fool most people into thinking it's metal. While this phone has some level of protection from water and dust, it's not an IP68 rating, which is disappointing. On the front, the display lies flat and there's only a tiny punch hole in the corner, as well as slim bezels all around. There's an optical fingerprint reader, which we found to be located a bit lower than we'd like. It works fast and accurately for the most part, but if you switch up fingers, even if both are registered, the system can get a bit confused and unlock a little slower. While the 9 doesn't have the LTPO screen like the Pro, the display is impressive nonetheless. The OnePlus 9 has a 6.5-inch fluid 8-bit AMOLED panel with a Full HD resolution and a 120Hz refresh rate. If any of this sounds familiar, it's because it's identical to the display on the OnePlus 8T. The OnePlus 9 had exceptionally good color accuracy and the display achieved near 100% coverage in both the sRGB and Display P3 color spectrums. You can switch between either natural or vivid color modes, though we prefer the more accurate natural mode here. Brightness was great with a maximum of 821 nits. The high refresh rate can ramp down to save power, but since it isn't an LTPO display, it won't go down to 1 Hz like on the 9 Pro. Whenever you're interacting with the display, it'll refresh at 120 Hz, but when you're not, like when you're watching a video or using the camera, it'll drop down to 60 Hz. What's really disappointing is that OnePlus lacks support for high refresh rate gaming. There's only a couple of games it has whitelisted, and even these only run at a maximum of 90 Hz. As far as the audio is concerned, the OnePlus 9 has a stereo speaker setup with a dedicated loudspeaker on the bottom and the earpiece as a second channel. The phone got a very good rating on our loudness test, which is pretty much the same result as on the OnePlus 9 Pro.
I'm wide awake, but you're a nightmare.
Like its sibling, the OnePlus 9 is one of the first devices to arrive with Qualcomm's new Snapdragon 888 chipset. The phone also used either 8 or 12 GB of LPDDR5 RAM that OnePlus claims can run up to 6,000 megabits per second. There's also UFS 3.1 flash storage, and the device comes with either 128 or 256 GB. In a nutshell, this phone has tons of power, and not only is it in solid flagship territory, but it's also ahead of many other 888-powered phones. Graphic-intensive gaming, heavy editing apps, and day-to-day tasks will all be a breeze for it to handle. The thicker graphene and copper materials used inside the phone should also help dissipate the heat towards the frame. The phone has a 4,500 mAh battery that consists of 2 cells. Despite the battery size, we only got an average of 87 hours of endurance. This seems to be a frequent occurrence for phones with the 888 chipset, likely due to having a high standby draw. Much more impressive is the fast charging. With Warp Charge 65T, the phone got 65-watt fast charging, and that means it'll charge from flat to 100% in 29 minutes. The phone also has 15-watt wireless charging and reverse wireless at up to 5 watts, though, like we said earlier, it's only available in Europe and North America. The OnePlus 9 features Android 11 with Oxygen OS 11 on top. We first saw this UI on the OnePlus 8T. Over the years, Oxygen OS has been tweaked with large displays in mind, so many things are now easier to reach one-handed. It's no longer as stock as it used to be, but it's still very quick and butter smooth. You get a lot more customizations now, from changing up the ambient display, the system icons, the accent color, and the font. There's still a OnePlus shelf, but now to access it, you swipe down on any area of the home screen. OnePlus also has a feature called Turbo Boost 3.0, which allows 25% more apps to run in the background. Possibly the most intriguing part of this device is the camera setup. The OnePlus 9 has a 48 megapixel main sensor with omnidirectional PDAF, a 50 megapixel ultra-wide camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensor, all in collaboration with Hasselblad's camera engineers according to the marketing. You can see some design differences in the camera app that reflects the partnership, most strikingly the shutter button and the shutter sound. Aside from that, most of the in-app changes are in the Pro mode. You can change the ISO, white balance, and other parameters more intuitively. The auto mode toggle is always there too. Beyond that, not much has changed in terms of the app. So, what about the pictures themselves? During the day, images had a decent amount of detail. Some textures can turn soupy in lower frequency detail areas, and OnePlus has increased the sharpening to compensate, which we can't say we loved. Images are noisier than we expected, and it didn't look great when cropping in. Colors were okay, and during the day they were neutral overall, though they had saturated greens under bright light. It's definitely an improvement over the performance of the OnePlus 8T. Dynamic range was more limited than some of the competition, and despite nicely balanced highlights, shadows were often a bit darker than we'd like. With the ultra-wide shots were vastly superior to previous OnePlus phones. The sensor captured an impressive amount of detail, and the freeform lens got rid of distortion entirely, so straight lines appear straight even in the edges and corners of your shot. The only downside is that this camera suffers from the same color issues as the main cam. So expect over-sharpening, crushed shadows, and a ton of noise. Unfortunately, and surprisingly, you can't use the Pro mode with this camera and save the shots. The OnePlus 9 does not have a dedicated telephoto lens, and the phone performs a digital zoom instead. At 2x, image quality was not impressive. Details are soft, and there doesn't seem to be any upscaling. There's no OIS in the main camera either, and this is very apparent with zoom shots. The phone can only shoot portraits with the main camera, and by default, the portrait mode is zoomed in slightly to reduce distortion. This, however, meant that images were slightly softer. The background blur was aggressive, and since you can't adjust it, it's a bit of a hit or miss. You can use the ultra-wide camera for macro shots, and as a whole, the phone takes very good macro images, though the camera can't get as close to the subject as with some competitors. When the light gets low, the OnePlus 9 doesn't disappoint. Even without nightscape, you can get good detail, nice exposure, and accurate colors. The OnePlus 9 Pro has a little bit more detail though. Still, turn on nightscape and the two are almost identical. Images look excellent with good detail, exposure, and color. With the new ultra-wide lens, nightscape is definitely the way to go, and with it on, images look great in most conditions. The OnePlus 9 has a 16 megapixel fixed focus snapper on the front. It provided a nice level of detail, decent color performance, and adequate dynamic range during the day. Selfie portraits were okay as well, but you get the same issues with the aggressive blur as on the main camera. The OnePlus 9 can record up to 8K at 30 FPS. The image quality is less impressive than we'd like due to a lower bitrate. It just doesn't make sense to use it most of the time. The ultra-wide camera can also record 8K footage, though it seems like the video has been upscaled from a lower resolution image. In short, the 8K video with this camera looks worse than the 4K version, so you should just stick with the lower resolution. Now, as far as 4K video is concerned, it was great from both cameras. There was plenty of detail, good dynamic range, and overall, we liked the image quality. The stabilization was okay, but it can struggle when you're trying to pan. What's more irritating is that you can't disable it, and it comes with a significant crop to the final image and makes framing more difficult. In short, the OnePlus 9 has a better camera setup than the OnePlus 8T by a huge margin. We didn't see much evidence of the new Hasselblad color science, and there were often times when we were disappointed with OnePlus's processing, which could have pushed these cameras to a new level. For now, this is a good camera setup, but there are better cameras on the market for a lower price. Lately, the feature gap between the Pro and the non-Pro versions of OnePlus phones has been getting bigger. It's reasonable for it to miss an extra camera and the slightly nicer screen of its sibling, but the 9 also has no certified water protection, no telecamera, a downgraded main sensor from the OnePlus 9 Pro, and even a plastic frame. So, should you get it? Well, it has a very nice screen, a powerful chipset, blazing fast charging, and a good camera setup. It's a very, very good phone. It's just a bit uninspired. So if you do decide to check it out, also make sure to check out the iPhone 12 and the Galaxy S21 while you're at it. Thank you for watching, everyone. Stay safe, and I'll see you guys next time.